If you're thinking ahead to the weekend and are considering watching a movie, Jim Ferguson continues his trend of reviewing films based on true stories, and he joins us now with Marshall.
We're getting a lot of true stories, aren't we?
Yeah, and you know what? They're enjoyable.
They are. This, of course, the true story of Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, starring Chadwick Boseman. But his right-hand man, a great character, Sam Friedman, played by our guest right now, Josh Gad, who you may remember from Broadway, The Book of Mormon.
Yes.
He's so good in that, and he's done so many things. You'll recognize him right away. He's a very hot young actor right now.
Very talented, very grounded, it feels like. He usually does comedies, I feel like.
He is
right?
a comedian.
Yeah.
He's a comedian, yeah. He's done a lot of voice work too, you know, but he's so good in this movie. A reluctant sidekick to Thurgood Marshall. It's the early days when he's very young, you know, and he's a young man who suffered the prejudice, the Jewish prejudice in Europe, and so he's familiar with that.
He identified
but he's reluctant to get involved in the NAACP, where he ends up as president one day.
Two unlikely characters together, and you talked to Josh Gad.
Yeah, here he is.
Let's check it out.
Is there any more pressure on you as an actor when you play a man that was a great man? To get it right?
There's unbelievable pressure, especially because his daughter, his real-life daughter, Laura Friedman, was so heavily involved in the process. And so it became incumbent on me to do her father justice, to make sure that I was telling a version of this story that honored his legacy. And anytime you're doing anything with a biographical intent, you sort of have this obligation to honor the individual, and that was very important to me in this case.
It had to be in your research extremely important to Sam, who at first was concerned with himself and his family, which he should have been, until he met Thurgood Marshall. That meeting and working with him in that case had to change his entire life.
Yeah, and in many cases it did. I mean, it certainly brought worldwide, if not national attention to Sam Friedman as a lawyer, and this alliance is indicative and symbolic of so many similar alliances that were taking place at that time between African Americans and Jews. And this movie, I think, speaks to that as well in a way that feels very unique and fresh.
Of course, he certainly was no stranger to prejudice and hatred because he was living through it with his family in Europe at that particular time. And of course, the prejudice against the Jews in Europe went back hundreds of years.
Yes, that's correct. And I think that there's so many similarities between these two men. Between Sam Friedman and Thurgood Marshall. And just because one is being discriminated against because of the color of his skin and one is being discriminated against because of his faith, the discrimination knows no boundaries. It doesn't have favorites. It doesn't pick favorites. And these two men, although they're on different paths, those paths are bound to intersect, and that's where our story picks up.
Excellent. And on Friday,
Chadwick Boseman, who plays Thurgood Marshall, is his third biopic. He was Jackie Robinson, he was James Brown, and now Thurgood Marshall.
He's on a roll. We look forward to that as always. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Alex. Have a good weekend.
You too. Now, for even more of these celebrity interviews, just visit TucsonMorningBlend.com and search for Hollywood Happenings.